Hello everyone and welcome to Beginner's Code, a place for you to learn with me as I dive deep into the coding world. Now before I start, if you want to learn a little more, please check out my website, my Instagram or my GitHub for projects. The links for these will all be in the descriptions below, so please feel free. Also don't forget to subscribe to see more videos from me as I teach you through the basics. Today we will be looking at functions part 3, including looking at some more examples to create some programs. So in part 2 we looked at functions and how to use the return keyword. And now we're going to take a quick look at returning some data types. So for example, we can make some stock prices, which will be a list of tuples. And for example, we can use Apple, which will be, say, 600. These are not the correct stock prices, by the way. We can use Google, which will, this needs to be in a tuple. Google, which we can say is 800, and then say Microsoft, which is, say, 700. And what we can now do is use a function to check the stock prices and return a tuple of the stock price with the max. So this would be perfect for, say this list was 100 different tuples, all of different stock prices. We could use this to find out the most, the highest stock price. So check underscore stock. And this will take in a stock prices, which will be the list. And then we can create a variable called current max, which will be assigned to the value of 0. And then stock price, which will be assigned to a empty string. Now we can use a for loop and we can unpack each entry of the list. So we will use the for loop to unpack the first one, which will have the, say, key value basically, or the stock price. So what we'll do is we'll have for stock comma price in stock underscore prices. If price is greater than current max, so if whatever price or whatever second element of the tuple is passed in is greater than the current max, which at the moment is 0, then we will reassign the current max to be the same as the price. And then we can reassign the stock price to be the same as the first element, which is stock, so AAPL. And then outside of this if statement, so once the for loop's finished, we can then return a tuple of stock underscore price, comma current underscore max. And now if we print check underscore stock and we just pass in the stock prices that we made at the top, and then if I run this, if my terminal opens, terminal, new terminal. Okay, so if I just clear that and then press run, yeah, so we get Goog and then 800 because Google is 800 and it's the highest stock price. So you've seen that we can return tuples, but we can also return lists. So if I delete this, and then what I'll do is I'll just create a list of numbers that will be generated using the range function. So 0 through to 10. And then what we want to do is just create a function that will times it by 5. So times 5, and then it will take in a list. So what we'll do is we'll create a new variable that will just be an empty list, and then we'll loop through the list that we're passing in. So for I in list, we will then create a variable that will be assigned to each index of the list we're passing in times by 5. And then we will just append the number that we've just created to the list up here. So whatever index times by 5 will then be appended to this list. And then after that, we will return the list. And what we can then do is just print times underscore 5 and then pass in nums. And if I run this, we get down here the list of 0 through to 10, well, up to but not including 10, but they are all times by 5. So 1 times 5 is 5, 2 times 5 is 10, 3 times 5 is 15, etc., all the way through to 45. Okay, so next we can also use user input, and we can use user input outside and pass it in as a parameter, but we can also use user input inside of the function. So what we'll do is we'll just define a function called greetUser, and it won't take any parameters, but then we'll create a name, and it will be assigned to user input of please enter your name. And then what we're going to do is we'll just return an F string that greets the user with the name in title case. So return F string hello and then name.title, and we'll call the function on that title, or we'll call the method inside of the F string so that when it's printed it is executed. And then we will just print greet underscore user. Oh, I just realised I've spelt user wrong there. So now if I run this, I didn't call it, that's why. So if I call this down here and then run this, we get please enter your name. And if I type in Chris in lowercase, we then get hello Chris back in title case. And then what we can also do is we can take a little look at scope. So scope is something that's definitely needed when it comes to knowing about functions. And for example, one of the easiest ways to show this is by creating a variable outside of the function. So result equals 0. And then if we just create a function called add 5, and then we just add 5 to the result, and then print result. And then if I do add 5 and call it and then run this, down here we don't get any output. And that's because there is actually no result that the function can actually use, because the result isn't it's not in the local scope. So functions have their own scope. And there are 4 different types or 4 different levels of the scope. And if we were to have a nested function, then there would be an enclosing scope. So that would be 2 different scopes to the function. However, this result up here would be a global variable. So what we could do is global result and then run this. Okay, don't know why that didn't work. I didn't call it, that's why. Keep forgetting to call it. So now we get 5 back, and that's because we are accessing that result up here. Whereas if I take that out, we will see down here that we actually get an error, which is what we should have been seeing earlier, but I've forgotten to call it. So yeah, we are now getting local variable result referenced before assignment, and that means that it is referenced here before it is actually assigned, and the assignment is outside of its scope, which is why. So this global scope is a scope that just happens when you're typing normal code that doesn't use functions or classes. They all have their own separate scope. And finally, there is the built-in scope. And you can find out more about the built-in scope, I think, by typing in and then maybe that, I think. I'm not 100% sure. Oh, I need to remove that. If I try that, yeah, so we get some built-ins, that's what it is. So if I print built-ins, we should see a list of, so these are all the different scopes of the built-in scope. So there are different things that will happen, such as like the errors that we encounter, but also there are different like min, max, next, certain names that come with Python that we can actually use in our code. And if Python, when it's executed, it will check the local scope, check the enclosing scope, check the global scope, and then check the built-in. And if it's not in the built-in, or if it's not in any of them, then it will throw an error. So there is a lot to know about scope, But if you do a little bit more research on the internet, there's a lot of helpful articles that will talk you through how you can actually go about it. So now we're just going to take two quick looks at some examples. And the first will be just creating two functions that actually interact with each other. So we'll create a function called total, which will take in a list. We'll create a local variable called num and assign it to the value of 0. And then we'll use a for loop. So for I in list, so for every element in the list that's passed in, we will just add the element to num. And then we will return num. Now we'll use we'll create a new function called cube, and this is going to cube every single number. Well, this was going to cube the total number. So what we have here is we are finding out the total amount of the list, and then we are going to cube the total. So we'll pass in num, and then num is equal to num raised to the power of 3. And then return num. And now we can just generate a list. So range 1 through to 100. Oh, actually no, we'll do 1 through to 10. And then we will create a variable called new. And we'll just call the total function with the list that we've just generated passed in. And then we will call the cube function, and we will pass in the new variable that's been created from the list that's been passed in to this total function, if that makes sense. So now if I run this, I need to print it, that's why. So if I print this and then run, we see down here we get 91,125, and that is all of these numbers added together and then cubed. Now we can also create a few different functions that will basically allow us to actually use it within a program. So what this program is going to be for is it's going to create the Fibonacci sequence. And the Fibonacci sequence is basically the first numbers added together. So it will be 1 plus 1 is 2, and then plus 2. So 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3, so we put 3 there, and then 2 plus 3 is 5, so plus 5. 5 plus 3 is 8, so plus 8, and then 8 plus 5 is 13, so plus 13, all the way through. And the Fibonacci sequence is actually also, I think, known as the golden ratio. It's very, very well known in not only maths, but also science and certain aspects of nature. There's a lot of flowers that actually use the golden ratio and things like that. So what we're going to do is just create a function called fib, and this will take in a value of n. And what we're going to do is just create two variables, a is 1 and b is 1, and then we will use fib sequence. So we'll create a variable called fib sequence, which will be assigned an empty list. And what we're going to do is just loop through the range of n, so whatever number is passed in. So say we pass in 4, we will then loop through 4 times, and we will do fib underscore sequence dot append a. So we are going to append a to the list, and then we will then reassign the values. So a comma b is equal to b comma a plus b. So what's happening here is a will be assigned to b and b will be assigned to the value of a plus b. So if we take the ones, for example, a will be 1 and b will be 1 plus 1. So b will be 2. And then it will be a will be 2 and b will be 1 plus 2. So it will be 3. So that is how we can actually get the Fibonacci sequence to start going. And then outside of the for loop, we will just return fib underscore sequence. And then we need to ask a user how many values they want to use the Fibonacci sequence to. So if we do def to underscore n, and then we can just ask the user some user input. So say, please enter a number for Fibonacci sequence. And what we'll do is we'll just wrap this in an int. So one way to actually make this more foolproof would be to add try except errors, just to make sure that if something was entered that isn't the right thing, then we will be returning something else that won't actually crash the function. But for the time being, I'm just going to use normal functions without any try excepts or error handling. So we'll return the user, which will be whatever number they have entered. And then we will define a new function called start. And this is just going to ask the user if they are ready. So are you ready to start? Type quit to end. And then if ready is double equal to quit, or the string of quit, then we will return false. Otherwise, or else, we will return true. So now we'll use a while loop. So while start, and we'll call this start function here. So it will start with a question saying, are you ready? I'm actually going to take that out and just put, are you ready? And then type quit to end. So if the user types in quit, then the while loop will be false and it will not run. If the user types in anything else, then the while loop will be true and it will run. So what we'll do then is we'll assign a new variable to the function call of toN. And that's because we want to know how many numbers the user will be, or how many numbers we want the Fibonacci sequence to extend to. And then we'll just create a Fibonacci variable, which will be assigned to the function call of fib with the number that we've just asked the user for passed in. And then we'll just print Fibonacci. And if I run this, you'll see down here, are you ready? Yes. Please enter a number for Fibonacci sequence. I'll say 8. So we get the values back of 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and 21. So I can go again. So now if I say 25, we get a lot more values and it drastically increases around about this point. So we do see a massive, massive increase in what the numbers are actually doing. So if I do it one more time and do 50, we have a ridiculous amount of numbers down here and I don't even know where to start in comprehending them. But that is how we can use functions to interact with other functions, and this is the end of how to use functions. That's all for today's video. Hopefully this has helped your understanding on how we can use our functions to really enhance our code. If there's anything that you'd like me to cover further, please don't hesitate in reaching out to me by dropping a comment below on Instagram or through my website. Stay tuned, as in my next video, I will be doing a code along so that you can code with me. If you liked what we've been through today and you want to learn more, please drop a like and subscribe to my channel to keep up to date. Thank you and see you next time.